I brought lunch to my fiancé's office, homemade, still warm, and within 5 minutes I fired his secretary, humiliated him in front of his staff, and walked out knowing the engagement was already dead. I just didn't know yet how much of his life I was about to take with it. She stopped me at the front desk like I was a lost delivery driver, smiled that fake corporate smile people use when they think you don't belong, and said loudly enough for half the floor to hear, "Ma'am, who are you here to see? Do you have an appointment?" And what really burned wasn't the question. It was the silence, the way nearby employees suddenly found their keyboards fascinating while watching through reflections, the way humiliation becomes entertainment when no one thinks it's their turn. So I pulled out my phone and called HR as calmly as ordering lunch. "Hi, this is Hazel Hart. Terminate the executive secretary immediately." And her face drained so fast it looked like someone unplugged her. She ran down the hallway with tears already loading, probably practicing her victim speech. 10 minutes later, my fiancé Andrew Miller appeared, annoyed, not embarrassed. Frowned like I'd committed a social faux pas, said she was new, that I didn't need to go that far. Then patted my hand, actually patted it, and suggested I buy her coffee because she was scared. And in that moment something clicked so cleanly it was almost peaceful. Men don't protect women, they protect convenience. So I stood up, walked to his desk, opened the lunchbox I'd woken up early to make, dumped it straight over his head, sauce, rice, dignity, and before he could process that reality I grabbed the crystal paperweight and slammed it into his shoulder hard enough to make him scream like a man whose ego had finally met consequences. When he yelled, "Hazel, are you insane?" I wiped my hands, smiled politely, and said, "Yes, I'd have to be insane to let you humiliate me and still call it love." Then I walked out in heels sharp enough to echo and went straight to my father to cancel the engagement, only to be told this wasn't a breakup but a strategic decision involving families, assets, and future leverage, which is when I realized the front door was locked. So that night I took a side entrance and met Andrew's half-sister Adrienne Miller at a private club, slid a folder across the table, watched her smirk disappear page by page, and after a long silence heard her ask how reliable it was. And when I said every connection I had, she leaned back and said, "Then tell me how we work together. Because women like us don't cry, we negotiate." Later that night, I walked out with a young male model purely for the visual. And when Andrew stormed over demanding if this was why I wanted out, the model laughed and said Andrew looked tired, like a man running on expired confidence, and I exchanged numbers with the model right in front of Andrew before getting into my car and watching Andrew do what insecure men always do. Chase me through traffic in a luxury car like anger counts as horsepower, so I calmly called highway patrol. And when flashing lights pulled him over, the world finally went quiet. By morning it was everywhere: photos, headlines, Andrew Miller trending. And that's when the secretary got brave and started messaging me, calling me old at 30, bragging about living in his apartment, promising he'd choose her on my birthday. So I accepted her messages, saved everything: screenshots, voice notes, photos, and sent one email to Andrew and every shareholder stating that if the engagement wasn't terminated, all of it would go public the next day. On my birthday, Andrew showed up 40 minutes late, smelling like sweet perfume and bad decisions, handed me a gift that was aggressively wrong. And before I finished cutting my steak, his phone rang and he rushed out to handle an emergency. After which the secretary sent me a photo of him holding and kissing her like she'd won a prize. So I compiled every receipt into one clean file and sent it to the board. And suddenly Andrew's father was on the phone laughing like this was negotiable, offering 5% company shares as compensation, and I said 10 or I publish, and after a silence long enough to age him, he agreed. Andrew was forced to kneel, and looking at him I realized something almost funny: he wasn't attractive anymore. Just hollow, like a man who confused borrowed power for talent. The engagement was canceled, shares transferred. The secretary tried one last time to threaten me in person, saying if she were at my level he wouldn't even look at me, and I laughed and told her the truth, that she was young and pretty. But that was all she had, because his family didn't choose me for love. They chose me because I could take them further, and Andrew lost everything: status, power, credibility. Tried crawling back with flowers and apologies, promised to handle The pregnancy like it was a loose end, and I held up my phone and told him she was already booked into the best private hospital in postpartum. Sweet, because his mother would never give up the first grandchild, and watching his face collapse was almost educational. Weeks later, I was on a date discussing business when Andrew saw me through the window, ran toward the street screaming my name, and stepped straight into traffic. And as sirens filled the air, I looked at my date and said everything was fine. Because it was, love can lie, men can lie, families can lie, but money never does. And I don't waste my future on men who only respect me when I'm holding the knife.